Daimler Ecascadia truck, $500,000. Tesla truck, same range, $250,000. Pretty amazing stuff. We also take a look at what the implications of this are in the trucking space. This is Greg for Tesla Fan Insight. Thanks for taking time out. If this is your first time on our channel, welcome. If you're a repeat visitor, welcome back. Well, we're, first of all, I have my musical interlude. So we decided today to focus on trucks because there are a lot of lessons that we picked up from the E-tron sort of debacle relative to the Model X that we wanted to bake into our truck experience. And so that's the focus of our show today, kind of a truck-focused one. So I wanted to reference you guys to the fact that we have some video here that you can view on Tesla's website. It's called Convoy. And what it is a, I'm going to tilt it just a little bit so it's a better shot there. So Convoy is some B-roll that Tesla gives to the press so that we can all get a feel. And as I was preparing for this show, I wanted to make sure that we had video that was appropriate relative to the trucks. But Tesla actually doesn't put out other than the introduction as well as this video, the introduction of the truck and this video, there wasn't a lot of video offered by Tesla for us to work with. And so I was kind of dreading the fact that it's not, the views of the truck aren't as clear, but I wanted to encourage you to go to the Tesla website if you're interested in the truck and really take a close look at it. So what I've done is put it in what's called 360 video right now that you're viewing. It allows you to change the orientation of the camera because you can use the power of your computer to change the pixel view of the truck. So if we stop here, you notice that for example, you could see the two screens there. You can clearly see there's no rear view. So there's a bunch of data points that we picked up on when we were looking at this that we wanted to have you guys take a quick peek at, both as we have it as B-roll or if you want to stop the show and kind of look at what exactly is there. Before I forget, this is Greg for Tesla Fan Insight. Thanks once again. Please remember to like and subscribe if you enjoy the show. Also wanted to note that we're on Patreon because you support there. And we're always trying to improve the show, so your input has an impact. One of the changes we've made has gone to a boom mic here instead of the mic that was directly in front of me. Distance is still the same, but it doesn't obstruct the view. And I have to admit, I feel a little naked here without a mic directly in front of me. So prior to jumping into the whole cost discussion, as I was sharing with you, there's a number of insights that one can derive from the video that Tesla's produced. I was really dreading this show a little bit because I like to put B-roll in for you guys to have something to look at as we're doing the show. But I was sort of disappointed that Tesla hasn't given us the intensity and volume of video that we can have on cars. And it seemed inappropriate to talk about trucks and have cars rolling behind me. So if you look on the close shot here, you can see the two screens, the one driver in the middle. There's no rear view mirror. And beneath the truck, if you tilt the camera down, you'll be able to see that they actually have a skirt under there, which allows you to sort of get a better feel for the aerodynamic efforts that are being made. The one thing that's missing, if you look at the back of the trucks, you'll notice that one of the latest innovations beyond the front cowling that covers the trailer is the fact that we now have these trucks that have kind of a rear skirt, if you will, that opens up to create better drag on the back of the truck, which is obviously another energy-saving move or aerodynamic move that improves fuel economy. So we definitely haven't been seeing it on the current Tesla trucks, but we expect it to be on the back of the trailers, particularly as they get closer to market. The one other strange thing you'll notice about the B-roll that we have going is the shot that they show here is effectively in the desert in Nevada. So as everybody knows right now, in terms of platooning, Nevada is one of the only places in the United States that's allowing trucks to run triple. And so, or triple, I think, is the max number. And so it's sort of implied that's where these trucks are. One other note is, notice how when the first truck goes by you, as they go to the second truck, there's no driver here and there's no driver there. So you'll notice that, again, might be worth a quick stop to really take in some of the information that's been provided. And if you look at or download the video from Tesla, you'll be able to step through it that way, or you can step through it by simply stopping my show and taking a closer look at all the points that I just shared with you. The one last point I wanted to share on this video that I thought was interesting is that the round trip for probably the first group of trucks is 250 miles. So the likelihood of people running in the desert like this, I think, is low, only because the first truck groups that are out there is really distribution center runs where you're maybe going to you start a distribution center for a grocery store, you pick up groceries, you hit 2 or 3 grocery stores to restock and then come back. And so it tends not to be a platooning situation at that range. And once you load up with your max 80,000 pounds, it sort of shifts, what's going to go on, because you just don't have a lot of range to play with, especially if it's cold out. You're hard pressed to make sure you stay on that route. So we think that, I think this will happen in terms of platooning in the middle of nowhere in the future, but we don't think this is a front-end activity that's going to be happening. So let's move on to our discussion that we started to show off on, which is focused on what's going on with Daimler and their Ecascadia that's in the United States, and what are the implications for Daimler as we go around the world. So we're sort of backing out lessons from the E-tron into what's going on with Daimler/Tesla in the trucking space right now. So as you probably all know, especially because we actually did a show on it, Daimler actually delivered two finished Ecascadia to the Port of Los Angeles. And so basically corporate headquarters in Germany is carefully watching these vehicles with engineers and sort of running behind them to gather as much data as possible as the company moves forward. Daimler is in kind of a pickle, and the pickle is illustrated by the pricing that we just described. What's actually happening is the Port of Los Angeles is eager to reduce their carbon footprint, and they're willing to pay between $400,000 and $500,000 per truck to get that done. And so after Daimler delivered these trucks, we have an interesting situation, because those trucks are now in the hands of the Port of Los Angeles, but we haven't actually seen them running on main roads. And the reason we believe that's the case is weight. It turns out that if you're on U.S.-sponsored highways, 80,000 pounds is the max, and I think there are exemptions to that. But the problem that they're having is because of the batteries that they've had to use and not having Tesla's thermal management system, they have an interesting challenge, which is if they load that with any volume of freight weight that makes sense, it's not allowed on the roads, but it can move freight within the port facilities because it can exceed the weight without any issues. And we would assume then that the port would make sure those trucks are rolling in spaces that will not impact, the destruction, in essence, of the roadways that are there. And, because in theory, at least 40% of the trucks already in the port are Daimler trucks, I think there's a comfortable working relationship in the fact that, this thing won't be a complete disaster. The last item we had in sort of this segment about Daimler is that There's a company called Picard that's based also in Oregon. The Freightliner division of headquarters is in Oregon. And there's a company called Picard that has a number of brands, including Kenilworth. And they actually put out a Class 7 truck that is priced, I believe, in the 400,000 range that they've sold to the state of California, sort of regional air quality authorities. And that vehicle is expensive because of the batteries, but it actually works, and they've taken delivery. So to some extent, Daimler's even being eclipsed by smaller competitors thus far based on their delay. So the question, the question that comes up is, why is it that Daimler is delaying so long in delivering this electric truck? They produced 2 of them, and now they're out. The answer to that is what we've shared. Number one, it's overweight. So something in that they're allowed 80,000 pounds totally, based on numbers put together by a professor at Carnegie Mellon prior to Tesla's truck coming out. He indicated that you end up with the battery capacity in the 18,650 zone. You basically end up with a truck that weighs about 70,000 pounds, somewhere in that 65 to 70,000. And the problem you run into is that's not a lot of freight that's left over to be carried afterwards. So the truck exists, it works. It's just that there's an issue going on. And that's kind of what we wanted to cover today based on the lessons that we've picked up from the E-tron. So what are those lessons? So the primary lesson that we learned from the E-tron about competitors coming after Tesla is that for a 100 kW battery, Tesla is getting somewhere around 300 miles. Is it 320? Is it 289? Let's call it 300 miles for that battery. Now, for approximately the same size battery, the E-tron is getting 204 miles. So what we call this in Spanish is big problema. So the big problem is, in the case of the E-tron, we've discussed the fact that consumers have a certain perception. And what that perception is that if you give me 100 miles of range, 25% of us are interested. If you give me 300-mile range, 75% of us are interested. So obviously, you give 400-mile range, the percentage of willing to buy customers will rise, particularly if the price point doesn't go crazy. So in general, those are the sort of general statistics. So the question that came up is, why is it that Tesla is able to get basically 50% or better range than what the folks at VW Audi can get? And so that's the million-dollar question right now, because we've seen the trucks in operation. That difference is the reason why there are a large number of customers willing to wait in line, and a very long line and a very long time, to get a hold of the truck, because competing firms can't match up. Now, this is actually kind of where we bring in Bob Lutz. So Bob Lutz has indicated that Tesla has no advantages. All you need to do is buy a bigger battery, and then you can compete with Tesla. So in the case of E-tron, in theory, they could just say, we're just going to put 120 or 140 kW kilowatt hour battery in that vehicle, and now we can boost our range. This is a good idea, but now you have the challenge of you've got to find, like, where's this going to go to make it subtle or not seen? How is this going to affect how is all that extra weight going to affect things as well? You have more battery, but you also have more weight you have to carry. Does that help? So we'll see if they do this, but the suggestion is that they're trying to find a way to produce a vehicle that's remotely in the realm of being profitable, even if the first iteration is at a loss. They have to line themselves up to get some kind of win. So when we extrapolate the lessons that we've learned here from what's going on with the E-tron, some very interesting things pop up. And what pops up is the weight of the Tesla vehicle can, in theory, be half the weight of competing vehicles like Daimler. So in essence, number one, you get more freight weight. So if Tesla is able to haul 50,000 pounds and it's an electric truck, it can effectively compete with existing diesel engines. It costs less energy to power the Tesla truck versus the Daimler truck. You have lower battery costs. So Tesla's neighborhood of pricing for a 250-mile range truck is about, we think it's about 200. They're saying 150 to 200. We think somewhere in the 200 to 250 range. This is actually double what you would pay for your average diesel truck at $125,000 to $130,000. But when you're trying to get customers to wrap their arms around double the price for triple the fuel economy, there are all these benefits Tesla can offer. It's a pill that most people don't want to swallow, but particularly in California, easy to swallow. In other places where pollution is an issue, like parts of Europe, etc., Norway, a lot of willingness to pay double. Now that's the question, and that's why we open, the show with a discussion of the fact that it's $250K. Now, when you say, hey, pay double, there are a lot of people who are like, okay, we're open to that. Now, when you say pay $500K, 4 times the money, almost 5 times the money, that's a little different party. So, so the bottom line here is that, guess what? If we in fact have this Tesla truck that arrives at less than $250,000, but will give you 250-mile range, and you can haul 55,000 pounds worth of freight in that 250-mile range, this is what you call a colossal disaster for the entire trucking industry. We sort of pick on Daimler here because they have been trying to produce trucks that at least so they can put something on the road to show customers they're serious about making progress here and sort of blunt the impact of Tesla's potentially arriving. So we're kind of fascinated, intrigued by how this whole thing is lining up. And so the sort of the sketch look at what the Tesla Semi does compared to the Daimler Semi, as we've reviewed, is one, you're getting double the range for half the price, basically. Number two, because you're using technology to get extra range and you don't have to carry those extra batteries, you now have a great situation because you have less electricity cost to power the truck. You have, less weight to power said truck, which can be pounded back into freight weight. And in fact, because Walmart is involved, some of the biggest companies like Pepsi, Walmart, et cetera, are involved. And with the help of McKinsey consultants and others, they can easily find routes that take advantage of the battery. And in fact, they could suboptimize, which is simply remove more battery to cut range down to 150 miles, because they may only need a route of 50 miles, and an extra 50 miles in case there are any issues would solve it. And they could even, put in midpoint fast chargers if in fact it was found that they might need extra range during the winter months. And so Tesla really gives manufacturers a best case scenario. I was, there's a new phrase that I've learned. I'm in a cybersecurity master's program, and there's a concept that was shared called single point of failure. So when you set up your security system, beta, let's look at a company. You have on the outside cameras, then you have walls, then you have perhaps dogs, then you have security guards that walk around. So as you can see, you have all these layers of security that you don't end up with just one door being a potential failure for that entity. And so what also comes to mind is the fact that the supercharger network that Tesla has, even if customers choose either a supercharger or a mega charger for their trucks, there's something called a single point of failure. So if that truck ran out of juice at some point for some reason, you now have the benefit of the fact that they could possibly duck in on an emergency into the supercharger stations and charge up there on an emergency basis and keep going. Another reason why customers choosing a solution in the electric truck space may give the edge to Tesla if the fraction of the price and the other benefits don't win the day. So let's step back and take a look at this in terms of what are the implications of this relative to Daimler in particular and the entire industry? And the answer is we think that this is a disaster because I can actually say hello because we're after 20 minutes here. We can also field questions. But in general, we're suggesting that the Norton guys are popping up on us. We're suggesting basically that this is an interesting circumstance or sad circumstance for Daimler and its competitors in the trucking industry because luckily Elon hasn't figured out the fact that he could simply have the trucks manufactured elsewhere and not do it himself and accelerate the speed with which those trucks get to market. And because he's not doing that, it drags the process out longer and gives more time for competitors to figure out what they're going to do. So, it's an interesting circumstance, and we'll keep you posted on sort of new information that we learn. Probably a third or so of our shows are actually truck focused, and that's really how we got going. And so, hence, we tend to do at least one, if not two, truck focused shows per month. And then if there's a lot of news, that number might accelerate. But we really thought it'd be an interesting thing to take the lessons of E-tron versus Model X and bake them into the trucks to sort of gather a better sense of sort of where we're headed and why and what the implications might be for everybody involved. So, we're a little bit skeptical about could Tesla produce a 250-mile range truck for ballpark $250,000. And the argument from the folks in Germany was, there's it's an interesting circumstance because basically you have this huge problem of how do you compete with somebody in that manner. So there was a comment by a senior executive at Daimler who indicated that physics may be different in California versus in Germany. And we don't think it's, based on some of our expert advice, it's not about physics. It's really about the fact that you actually have a huge problem going on here for competing firms against Tesla's software technology at many different levels. So this is we're closing out on our show today. I wanted to thank all of, Tag, I saw you out there. Gareth, I also saw you out there. We chose an off time, so we typically don't get as many commentators or visitors at this time, but wanted to sort of get our next iteration of truck discussion in as a show, and then look forward to what the follow-on is from those that tend to be focused on the truck aspect of things. Don't forget to bounce up onto the Tesla website and get your download of the truck footage and take a good look at it. It gives more clues in terms of what's going on with the semi that I think you also might find kind of interesting. And by the way, you'll notice there was no skirt on the trucks that were featured introduction, or we haven't seen them on the moving prototypes either. So, at any rate, just a reminder, we have our usual health tips. Don't forget to 25 leg lifts a day on both legs. Make sure you strengthen the quad muscles, eliminating potential. It supports the knees, reduces the potential for issues there. Also remember, don't go to bed within 4 hours of eating. Best case, lets the food digest so you don't have acid reflux. Highly recommended, minimum 2 hours in that regard. This is Greg for Tesla Fan Insight. In Germany, we say Tschüss macht's gut. In French, we say au revoir. In Hebrew, Hoda Hafez, Farsi, Hej Du. A question popped up from Tag where he was suggesting that auxiliary batteries in the trailer might be a way to solve some issues. The problem you have, though, is there's something called freight weight. So whatever battery, if you put batteries back there, it's a great idea. The problem is the weight still counts about against the 80,000 pounds you're allowed to carry. So it might work, but you kind of have that issue of weight to think about. In Russian, Zdravstvuyte, Chinese, Ni hao ma. In Jamaica, we say, enough respect, walk good man. And thank you for joining us today.